Well, alternative investment accounts instead of a 401k plan. Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, what if you have a 401k plan that just doesn't work? What are your alternatives? Today, we'll talk a little bit about that. Plus, later on in the program, the latest in the war with Iran and what all the last couple of days of developments actually mean. In the meantime, if you got a question for me, go to the website, www.prudentmoney.com. Send it in through the link at the top of the page. We'll get you taken care of. Very easy to do. Get your questions answered. And I want to be a resource for you to give you the information that you need to make better decisions and ask the right questions when it comes to being a steward of what God has given to you. Let's talk a little bit about a recap of yesterday when we talked about the 401k plan and asking the right questions. Is this 401k plan the right place for you to be investing the bulk or sometimes all of your retirement money? You know, an effective 401k plan has the following benefits. This is it's just a recap of what we talked about yesterday in case you missed it. First of all, it's got the employer match. I think very crucial to the overall success and reason that you'd want to use a 401k plan. The main thing being the employer match. You always want to take advantage of the free money that's given out in the form of an employer match. The second thing you want to look at is a vesting schedule. You know, how long do I have to be employed by this company to get full 100% ownership of the employer match? Every year that you are an employee at your company, you gain that much more ownership. Most of the time, that's how it works. You gain that much more ownership of the money that they contribute on your behalf. At some point, you get to 100%, and if you left the company to go to another job or whatever this reason was, you would retain 100% ownership of that employer match. So it's good to know what the vesting schedule is. The third thing, and maybe one of the more obvious benefits of a 401k plan, or maybe not a benefit, depends on your particular plan, is the investment choices. Through 32, I think, years of being a financial advisor, I've seen quite a few lineups of investment type investment funds that are available to the employee. And quite honestly, there's quite a few of them that just weren't that good, didn't have that very many good choices. So it's important to be able to have, in my opinion, I can make a 401k plan work from an allocation standpoint if I have a good index like the S&P 500 index fund, which represents the stock market, and then a bond market index fund, which represents the bond market. Between the two of those funds, and I know that we always talk about diversification, and that's plenty that's a very diversified portfolio. If you look at there could be up to 500 stocks on the S&P 500 fund side, and there could be thousands of bonds on the bond index side. So you're getting a little bit of all that, and that's what is affecting your money. And then you can decide, do I want more stock or do I want more bonds? Where do I want to take my risk? Where do I want to perhaps take less risk? And of course, that doesn't mean that by changing, my disclaimer, by changing your 401k plan that you automatically, it's like a lever, that you automatically guaranteed going to reduce risk. It's just historically that's worked that way. Or put it more into the S&P 500 and you're going to have more reward. It just depends on the market, of course. And it's always there to be very confusing, at least that's what I find. So investment choice is a very important part of it. And the other thing too is I wouldn't feel like, this is where a good financial advisor comes into play. I wouldn't feel like that I have to make those choices myself. I think that this warrants sitting down with a financial advisor and asking his or her opinion of where you should be and make a recommendation. And this is something that, that in talking to my clients, that Clients will send me statements every quarter, and I'll take a look at them for them. I think it's a good part of the relationship and a good service that your financial advisor probably offers. You probably just haven't inquired about it. Finally, does your retirement plan at work include the ability to direct contributions to a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k plan? I think very, very, very important. Having the ability to put money into a Roth, and especially the amount of money that you can put in each year to a retirement plan through the 401k system, is just a great advantage. And that trumps the employer match maybe not being there. That trumps maybe not so great investment choices. But if you have the S&P 500, if you have the Roth 401k plan as a option, I would take that any day of the week. That's not supposed to be a recommendation, or it's just the way my opinion about it. I've always said I think that the Roth 401k plan or IRA provides the greatest of benefits because you grow that money just like an IRA. You grow that money over time, tax deferred. You don't pay any taxes as long as it's inside of the account. But it comes the big benefit of the Roth 401k plan or the Roth IRA plan is at the end of a retirement, when you start to take money out, the money from the Roth account that you're using comes out tax-free. You don't have to pay any taxes on it. I think that's one of the greatest benefits. Of course, you don't get the tax up front, but I think the tax up front is very small in comparison to the overall tax advantage of getting tax-free income. You can also, as opposed to an IRA or a 401k plan, you're going to pay taxes on anything that you take out. So it's a very, very big advantage. Now, overall, globally speaking, the plan would have to be pretty bad to not participate at all in that plan. And I want to make that very, very clear because it does come down to another advantage is the maximum amount of money that you can put into a 401k plan versus any other plan at a tax advantage. So you get a maximum amount into a 401k plan or a Roth 401k plan, and you can invest at a tax advantage with a tax advantage strategy. So there's I don't say that you totally discount your 401k plan and not put any money into it. Maybe you have to. Once again, it just depends on the goals and what you're trying to achieve. Maybe it's not about that. If you look at the maximums of money that you can put in other retirement plans, maybe that, in addition to a little bit of money into the 401k plan, makes sense, and you can do that. It really comes down to the person who's helping you with this, whether it be a financial advisor or a CPA. You're wanting to look at the combination of eligibility rules of what you can put back into what account. We'll talk a lot more about that here in just a second. So what are you looking at as alternatives? Well, the first place to start looking would be the Roth IRA account, individual retirement account, or the traditional IRA or individual retirement account. You can put back up to $7,500 a person into a Roth or a traditional IRA. And if you're over the age of 50, you can add another $1,100 to that. And of course, these rules will change and can change depending on inflation contribution limits to each 401k of the husband and the wife. And so there's rules that you have to consider. This is why I think it makes sense to bring somebody in to help you do this and figure out what makes the most sense. And then if once you get through that and evaluating that as part of your overall diversified retirement approach, you can look at traditional investment accounts. And the question that you have to ask and that you need some clarity on is, how do taxes affect this decision when I get ready to take money out? So you're investing money into a traditional investment account, which is a taxable account. The Roth or the IRA are not taxable accounts until you take money out, and even then, a Roth IRA, you don't get taxed at all. So that's once again back to the big advantage of the Roth IRA. But a traditional investment account, you're going to be looking at taxes that are going to have to be paid, and what are the pros and cons of that as you go forward. Finally, you look at perhaps maybe fitting some money into an annuity. Now, I know that there are a lot of questions when it comes to annuities, and mainly, are they as good as advertised? And we've talked a lot about this, that I think you got to be careful if you choose to use an annuity, and you need to be able to know you need to look at it from the standpoint of not choosing an annuity, but looking at it from the standpoint of how can an annuity bring you closer to your goals. And you might find that, well, this is what's important to me, this is what my goals are, this is what they do, and you may find it's a mismatch, and no, then it's not going to be something I want to include, but you may find it is. And it's a great way to provide for income down the road, so keep that in mind. So who do you get to help you with this? I mean, that's 2 or 3 different choices that you could add to the 401k plan as places to contribute contribute retirement money. What about who do you get to help you do that? And you might just think, well, I could get my financial advisor. One of the things you want to keep in mind is that this is a lot of moving parts, a lot of things you have to figure, and not every financial advisor is fluent in tax law and how to really analyze and figure out what the right answer is. So it may be that you need to go to someone like a fee-based advisor or a CPA. It is really important to be able to work with somebody that can take what your goals are and what your values are, take a look at what's out there, take a look at what you have, and be able to really carve out a retirement plan for you. This is Bob Brooks, and we are up against a break. Stick around, and I'll be right back. Hello, this is Bob Brooks. Proverbs 22:3 and Proverbs 27:12 are the exact same verse word for word. I call them the stewardship verses of risk. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. On the Prudent Money Radio Show, we teach about risk, how to identify it, how to figure it out, and what to do about it. We believe that to be a prudent steward, you have to be a good risk manager. Listen to the Prudent Money Radio Show on Bible School Radio 91.3. Prudent Money, home of the modern-day steward movement.
Dynamic, practical, life-changing.
There's no point in going to church and not letting the Christ who gave birth to the church on the day of Pentecost change your life.
Join us each day as Pastor Paul Shepherd applies the timeless truth of Scripture to everyday life. It's Destined for Victory on this great station.
Weekday afternoons at 3:30 here on Bible School Radio, KDKR.
This is Rob Randall, your host and teacher of the Invisible War radio program. The Invisible War is the study of God's Word on how to walk in Christ's victory in the spiritual battles we face against the powers of darkness. Join me every Sunday morning at 9 right here on KDKR and KYJC in Commerce, your station for life.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. If you got a question for me, I've got a place for you to go to ask that question. Questions are important, and they lead to good decision-making once they're answered. And you can ask that question at the top of the webpage at prudentmoney.com. And there is a link. Just click through, ask your question. We'll get you taken care of. We were talking about using more than one advisor because in this particular type of calculation and answering the question of what types of programs should I involve myself with, what types of programs work well together with a 401k plan, what's my overall game plan, you need an advisor, whether it be a financial advisor or a CPA, they can answer those questions because they understand and know the rules and the regulations. So it's very important to get somebody who's that's what their specialty is. It reminds me of Proverbs 15:22. It says, "Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed." think there's a lot of wisdom in that verse. But whether you have a CPA, a fee-based advisor, or your current advisor, probably maybe you need more than one to do that. There is some wisdom to that. Or preferably, your current advisor realizes the limitations to what they can do, and they say, well, I know somebody that can answer this question. Let's set up a time with this individual, and then your current financial advisor coordinates all of it. To me, that's the ideal situation. I know that with my clientele that as a financial advisor, I don't know everything, and I'm not going to pretend that I know everything. And that's when I bring outside counsel in, because two can be more effective than one. Back to that Proverbs 15:22. With many advisors, they succeed. So keep in mind with that. So let's talk a little bit about some of the questions that you need to ask. What are the pros and cons of diversifying accounts for retirement? And you have to consider the income limitations and qualifying accounts. We know what's even eligible, because they do look at how much money that you are making and whether or not you're investing into a current 401k plan. And the good thing is you don't have to know all that. You have somebody that you have trusted counsel that can help you with that. What is the maximum I can invest? How can I maximize Roth contributions? That's my bias there, because I do think that that's the best place to go, and that's not to be given as advice. Just in my opinion, the best tax-free income really does seem to be an advantage, at least in my mind. What is the downside tax-wise to investing in a multiple account approach? That would mean, what's the downside from a tax standpoint if I put money in a Roth, if I put money in a 401k plan, if I put money into an outside individual investment account that is taxable? What's the pros and cons? What do you think is best for my situation, and why? I often find that people get the first part of that question correct. What do you think? What's your opinion? What do you recommend for my situation? But tell me why that you recommend it. Why is it that we do it a certain way, the way that you're talking about? What are the pros and cons? Remember, this is a choice that concerns income limitations, taxes, and based on future changes in the tax rules. That's very important. And that's when you always want to revisit it. Of course, I think that it makes sense to revisit your financial strategies that you're using on an annual basis, just to make sure that it's still relevant, because things do change. I mean, what makes sense for you today might not make sense for tomorrow. So keep that in mind. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. I do appreciate it. So let's talk a little bit about the latest with the war with Iran. Iran engaged some of the tankers, or tanker ships, I guess what you'd call it, yesterday, taking shots at them. And, of course, that's a violation of the ceasefire and agreement. So Trump said he was done the ceasefire agreement, and I think the bottom line is, and we'll look at this here in a minute, I don't really think he ever really had one by definition, and it was just somewhat of a unstable agreement between two parties for very general reasons as to why they're going to stop firing at one of each other. But as we'll look at and talk about, do ceasefire agreements typically work? And the answer is they typically don't work. And this is why I felt like we would be back in this same place. There's a lot of postponing and putting off with the process. But at some point, you have to look at the situation for what it is and have to take action based on what you're looking at. But and this was probably one of the tougher, and still remains a tough situation, to try to figure out what the next move is. Where's this going to lead? And what kind of effect will this have on your retirement your retirement strategies and what you're doing? So you look at it from the standpoint of Trump gave him an out, and then looked past some things, shot at him a couple of times after they had shot at some tanker ships a couple of times during the ceasefire. But he would always come back, yeah, let's talk, no, that wasn't really a violation of the ceasefire. So it just got put off and put off and put off. At some point, he would step over the red line, and then he would back up, step back behind it. And then he would step over the red line, then he would pull it back. Today looks like he's stepped over the red line, and who knows what's going to happen at this point. But the bottom line with the ceasefire agreement, the underlying conflict is not resolved. A ceasefire is primarily used to stop the shooting, but it doesn't solve disputes over territory, political control, things like nuclear weapons, which this one was completely based on, and realizing they did try to discuss and have these talks, but it was just seemed to me to be more of a for show than actually getting something done. That's my opinion. One or both sides don't trust each other. Definitely is this situation. Of course, I think that's with any situation and why war is at hand to begin with. And, there is no effective monitoring or enforcement. I would suggest that I don't even know where you really have effective monitoring and enforcement when it comes right down to it, but that was one that this resource they talked about. And then, of course, there's political pressure. I think that even though I would think that President Trump doesn't really particularly care about political pressure, I do believe that at some point he is getting quite a bit of it. Like I said, it doesn't seem to really bother him that much, but that is one of the issues. What would make a ceasefire more likely to succeed and improve the odds is clear written terms. They started off as clearly written, but they got very vague, and they got even more vague as the time went on. Defined boundaries and withdrawal schedules, that's definitely missing. Independent monitoring, definitely missing. Then finally, the last one on this list was ongoing negotiations to address the underlying issues. So that was definitely there. They had a lot of, what appeared to be a lot of negotiations, but Trump was not involved in a big way in that he sent other J.D. Vance and others out there to do that. So here we go. In short, a ceasefire is best thought of as a pause inviting, not a peace agreement. I think that's where we have some issues with the way this has been presented. It's been more presented as a peace agreement, and I think we've got a very, very long ways to go from that being the case. Still a great deal of uncertainty with the nuclear aspect, which was the main driver of doing this. And like I said, I think that both sides were just trying to buy time by the way they went about it. And, for a big reason why the ceasefire agreements don't end up working. So in our final minutes together, what does this mean for my investments for retirement? That's the big question that you should be asking. Do I need to make any changes? The only reason you would want to make any changes is because you either want to decrease or increase risk. That is the number one reason to make changes. If you're happy with the risk that you're taking, you don't need to do that. But that's something that I would encourage you to look at. Do I need to decrease or increase? And it just depends on what your values are. This is a great conversation to have with your financial advisor. And by the way, and this is just my bias, if you don't have a financial advisor, this is a great time, I think, to be looking into that as something you want to add to your list of advisors that you talk with about all types of things. But, whether you want more risk or less risk, that's what you need to look at. And a good advisor can help you figure that out. We saw interest rates take off a lot higher today. Remember, the interest rates are a cost of debt, making debt more expensive, and a cost of real estate, which means mortgage rates tend to go up when interest rates go up. And if mortgage rates go up higher, that really does put a damper on the buying and selling of residential real estate. Oil was up at one point today, up 8 to 9%, which you don't want to see, but that's inevitable with this turn of events. And of course, inflation appears to be here to stay and probably go higher. Don't mean to be doom and gloom about it, but that looks like a reality that we're going to have to face. So higher oil And what's interesting too is that gold was way down, so it makes you want to reevaluate why you're using gold, because if there is a crisis type situation that could happen because of this war, the environment is ripe for it, and gold should be up, but it's not. It's way down. And of course, the markets were affected today, and we'll see that's a day-by-day situation. The markets still seem to remain somewhat detached to reality. But that's what happens when you get in these types of stock market bubbles, which we've talked about. Listen, this is Bob Brooks. If you got any questions for me, please go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com. We are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time. Keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.